Let me introduce my guest tonight, or the guest that we have tonight on the program. He's a professor of law. He was the 5th Director General of the Nigerian Institute of Advanced Legal Studies from 2009 and 2014. He is a judge at the Commonwealth Arbitral Tribunal sitting in London, where he represents Nigeria and Africa. He's a founder and senior partner at Azinge and Azinge, a law firm in Abuja, with his wife, Valerie Azinge, a senior advocate of Nigeria. He joins us from his home in Abuja. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining us. Let's begin the conversation from the major story across the globe right now, the situation in Ukraine. From your own point of view, where you stand right now, what are your biggest fears?
Well, war at any level is not something that one should be proud of at any point in time. Because with war comes decimation, with war comes destruction, with war comes killings, annihilation, as the case may be. So to that extent, it is certainly an unwelcome development at this point in time in a world that has been ravaged for the past 2 years with COVID pandemic. For us to now face this uncertainty coming from Russia and the Ukraine axis. So one is very, very uncomfortable about the likely consequences that will flow from there, whether one of human destruction, infrastructural destruction, and certainly the effect it will have on the global economy, amongst others. But we should also take into consideration the likelihood of refugees that will flow over from Ukraine and other spheres to other countries like Poland, amongst others. So these are very, very challenging times in Europe and indeed the whole world. And one is not totally comfortable with this development. But we should also try and see and be sure that it does not escalate to use of weapons of mass destruction, that the deployment of missiles and other atomic energy weapons are not utilized at this point in time. So we keep praying, hoping that the human destruction will not be that much, but certainly something must give. The United Nations Security Council should take decisive action at this point in time, and the NATO community should not be in a hurry to abandon Ukraine, because the basic reason why Russia seems to be trying to get grip and hold of the NATO-Ukraine alliance is just because they are deadly challenges that they envisage that may come from such an alliance and with a country that is within proximity to Russia, as the case may be. So these are challenges that Russia may be thinking that they must come to terms with and obviously solve their riddle or problem as early as possible. I wouldn't know what the legal international law implications of what they just did, what President Putin did. Firstly, trying to recognize a separatist movement, and then secondly, moving in as trying to avoid other measures that would have, come with the open aggression initiated into an independent Ukraine. But moving through the separatist unions that are already in conflict with the broader Ukraine government, and then using that as an opportunity to gain entry into Ukraine and then continue their invasion from there. So these are challenges, and we just pray that things are controlled early enough to avoid total breakdown of law and order, as the case may be.
We need to be able to get some lessons out of this. If history has taught us anything, is that whenever these kind of clashes happen, there are a lot of takeaways from it. Prof, any lesson that we can take away immediately so far?
Well, it is also a grim reminder of what we are facing in this country. We have separatist agitations in Nigeria at this point in time. This will also be a lesson for us that it may open up a different divisive tendencies here and there, and obviously open us up for dismemberment, as the case may be. We should be very, very careful. We should also be careful of the likelihood of the terrorist groups using this as also an excuse to form a more or less a factional group that can wage a war against the government of the Federation. But more importantly, we should also know that such divisive tendencies are never good for anybody, that certainly having fought war once in this country, it will be totally unwary for us to think of another war, whichever way it may be. That war is never good for any country. And no nation, and I dare say this, that no nation seems to have survived a second civil war of any nature. So we should be preaching peace. We should be looking forward towards peace, and we should try and do everything humanly possible to make sure that peace reigns in our country, Nigeria.
You look at it now, the situation in Ukraine, what Russia is doing has forced the price of oil to over $100 per barrel. So this is the first time in the global oil market that this is happening in several months. When do you see this kind of tension fully de-escalated? I mean, based on what we have seen in history.
Well, like I said, let's face it, for instance, there are so many people that will benefit, wittingly or otherwise, from this conflict. Well, if the price of oil goes up, as one will always expect that it will, and continue to escalate, because there are some divisions here and there in the oil-producing nations, amongst others, then automatically Nigeria may stand to benefit. And then, of course, it can show up our oil finances to a very large extent. Yes, but will that be what we should be hoping for? Or should that be an excuse for us to be praying for an escalation of the conflict because we're likely to have some economic benefits falling out from there? But what I think should be done, and that is what I have alluded to, the Security Council should obviously start immediately imposing sanctions on Russia so that they can whittle down the effect of whatever they stand to benefit from the invasion of Ukraine. And then, of course, the NATO alliance should try as much as possible to give all necessary support. It is rather unfortunate that most of the NATO countries are not prepared to lend their forces to fight on behalf of Ukraine. But would it not get to that position if obviously they really want to support Ukraine in that regard? What other military assistance are they likely to get from the NATO countries in that regard? So one should think that it could only go beyond just standing by them, behind them, and then because we don't know the military strength of Ukraine compared to that of the mighty Russia. So it can only be a walkover, a walk in the park, as the case may be. But we believe that the whole world at this point in time should stand up and support Ukraine to the best of their ability, so that this aggression should de-escalate, and then, of course, this matter will be brought to a halt as soon as possible, so that peace can also reign once more in the whole world.
So let's come to Nigeria and look at the situation of things, especially as it's concerned the effort in fixing our constitution. There's been a lot of agitation. I guess this is going to be the 5th alteration to the Nigerian constitution, the 1999 constitution. So give us a sense of your view so far from the areas that are being altered, and perhaps what this could mean for our democratic development.
Well, it has been an expansive and an extensive, comprehensive intervention by the National Assembly. The much I know as a consultant to the Senate on the Constitutional Review. And I believe that the Ninth Assembly seems to have taken the bull by the horn. And if things work out the way they have projected, it is going to be very, very comprehensive. Well, let us look at it from many angles. They've taken on issues that will affect the judiciary, affect the legislature, and even affect the executive. Constitutional reviews that will affect even traditional rulers. Constitutional review that will affect the position or the status of the Federal Capital Territory, whether it will remain as it is or whether it will become a mayoral. Constitutional provisions that will concern the issue of indigenship and citizenship as it applicable to most people who are not non-indigenous but residents in other parts of the country, and what are their entitlements and the benefits going forward. Constitutional reviews that will touch on the issue of immunity of some legislative officers, i.e. the Senate President and the Speaker, amongst other things. The issue of whether the age of judicial officers should be advanced or increased from 70 years to 75 years as applicable to justices of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeals, and then on the whole, 70 years for judges of the other superior courts, that is the Court of First Instance in particular. So a whole lot of proposals that have been put forward, a good number of them, whether the issue of VAT, for instance, will remain on the exclusive legislative list or whether it has to go to the concurrent legislative list, wherein the state governments will also superintend over them, as is the case that is being canvassed in some quarters. And the issue of slight devolution of power to an extent, of the issue of prisons, whether prison will remain on the exclusive legislative list or whether it will go to the concurrent list, wherein state government can now build up their prisons and also move accordingly, amongst so many other issues of railway, whether it will still be the exclusive preserve of the federal government or whether state governments will also have a grip of that and legislate accordingly for the provision, and including energy, power, whether the position will remain as it is or whether state government can now develop their power, transmit as the case may be, which has remained an impediment for many of the power grids and stations as the case may be. So these are issues, and a host more, a whole lot of them that this Ninth Assembly seem to be grappling with. And we are looking forward to a drastic, comprehensive amendment of the Constitution if the fifth alteration will proceed as it's going. And I know that for sure. They have proposed the 2nd and 3rd of March to vote accordingly. And you know it requires 2/3 majority of the votes of the members for that to scale through. And thereafter, it will now proceed to the state level, wherein just a resolution of the House of Assembly will be required for it to pass. So if we are thinking that by March 3rd, that it would have been over at the National Assembly level and then moving down to the state, I believe that all things being equal, give and take, by June or earlier or thereabout, this whole issue would have been over. So Nigerians of all shapes of persuasion are now encouraged that they have the chance to go back to their states and speak with their representatives at the state level to make sure that either they understand the whole gamut of what is going on and how to participate by helping to influence them in the resolution they want to put forward. But I believe that a lot of work has gone into the alterations proposed, and we wait to see how it will fare on the floor of the green chambers and the red chambers, respectively, come March 2nd and March 3rd of this year.
Let's look at this perspective, Prof. And it's the fact that there's been agitations about restructuring. issues of state police. These are some of the fundamental challenges that the nation is confronted with, the issue of insecurity. And perhaps the thinking of a lot of people will be, there will be some movement in this direction, that the National Assembly, the lawmakers, and those who are working on this next alteration will work in fixing areas of the Constitution that will empower the security architecture of the country, or somewhat restructure it or reorientate it or re-engineer it in such a way that it will stem the tide of insecurity in the country. What do you make of this area, and perhaps what is in the alteration? Does it answer the question of state policing and how we can go forward in fixing the insecurity question?
Well, for the members of the committee, the National Assembly members of the committee, I will say that arguments were canvassed and extensively, but I think regrettably it did not scale through the issue of state police. But I believe that that does not end the story. It is for the whole membership of the National Assembly to now vote as appropriate. Certainly, the tendency is likely to be that they will vote against. But there's nothing saying that the preponderance of members that were not in the committee may, in their own wisdom, decide to vote in favor of state policing. They have their own arguments, and then superior wisdom and superior arguments can prevail ultimately. But for now, it appears to be no to state police. They have their arguments for that purpose. But they also voted for the division and removal of separation of the office of the Attorney General from that of Minister of Justice, and a whole lot more that seem to be in the offing. It is unfortunate that one cannot make a clear-cut projection at this point in time what the vote will be for state police, but it does appear that it is a no for now. Well, I understand why that should be the case, because many people believe that at this point in time, for purposes of restructuring, we should be pushing towards state control. But they have arguments, and some of them appear plausible and convincing, persuasive, in the sense that it is likely to be mismanaged somewhere at the state level, that the command structure is what is critical, and the command structure is that the Inspector General of Police will continue to hold sway, as the case may be in this regard. So looking at things from that angle, I believe that they may have their reasons. Some of them have been state governors in their own right. So they understand the workings of the control structure of the police. And it is to them a much more plausible argument that we are not there yet for the state police to reign. So how that will affect the security architecture of our people at this point in time, I wouldn't know. But we just wait and pray. But in all other ramifications of that, as far as the alterations are concerned, I believe that the work they have done is quite profound, very, very deep, and I believe that it is something Nigerians will be proud of if actually it is concretized, if it is fully crystallized and well cemented going forward.
But for those who are pushing for restructuring and who have clamored for that, we say, look, we shouldn't even go into the 2023 election without effectively restructuring this country. How much of their fears and concern would this alteration be serving?
Well, in trying to address some aspects of devolution of power, I believe to that extent the issue of restructuring is gaining ground. When we talk about the prison, when we talk about VAT, when we talk about the possibility of which other one, VAT, prison, amongst others, the railway, the power, among all these are trying to yield some of this to the state government control through the concurrent legislative list, or the residual legislative list, as we say in constitutional law, which is only within the control of the state. If we consider that, seriously speaking, we are already working along restructuring. So it is only right to argue that to a very large extent, the National Assembly, wittingly or otherwise, are touching on issues of devolution. It may not be a wholesale restructuring, but the issue of devolving from the 68 provisions or items under the exclusive legislative list, trying to whittle it down to an extent that a good number of those items on that list can now move over to the concurrent legislative list, where the state government can also legislate. So to a large extent, that is restructuring for me. That is devolution of power. That is trying to take away so much from the federal government to the state government. If we're able to achieve that, we should also be thinking that we have restructured to a very large extent. Because the whole issue of restructuring is against the fact that the federal government seems to be an octopus that seems to be controlling so much. So if we're able to whittle down the items on the exclusive legislative list and wherein we can now feed some to the state government, then the issue of restructuring to a very large extent would have been addressed. So we don't need to dismember the whole country or the whole constitution in order for us to achieve restructuring. I don't think that will work when you have a sitting National Assembly presiding at this point in time.
I wanted our viewers to listen to the Deputy Senate President Ovia Omar Gege yesterday when the document, the draft was laid before the lawmakers. Take a listen to him and allow Prof to respond to some of the issues raised.
The report of the Constitution Review Committee will be laid on Wednesday tomorrow, and thereafter we'll take our vote on March 1st, which will be Tuesday. That will give us about 4 to 5 days to review the report, consult as we deem fit, and be prepared to vote.
So, give us a sense of, in terms of the procedures for passing a constitution, is a stringent one that the constitution has provided in amending some section of the constitution. Even this constitutional amendment itself takes a very, very tedious process. But give us a sense of what is next. What step should we be expecting from the laying and the voting in the National Assembly?
Well, the voting pattern is well expressed in the Constitution. It says that it should be passed by 2/3. So for any of the items, there will be a vote, and then we will count the number of people that have voted. And it is not 2/3 of those present and voting. It's 2/3 of the membership. So I've heard the leadership of the Senate trying to push that all members should endeavor to be in attendance on that day, and that all other meetings and activities of the National Assembly should come to a halt. In other words, there will be no excuse to travel, there will be no oversight function, there will be nothing else except being in attendance and voting. So it is for them to take stock and take records. What is the entire population or membership of the House of Rep? What is the entire population and membership of the House of the Senate? By the time you count the votes, would it aggregate to 2/3 majority? Because that has to be worked out. If it falls below 2/3, whatever 2/3 may be, it falls below 2/3, it means that that vote is dead on arrival. That item automatically will elapse. And they will now move on to the next one.
Right.
So it is.
I think the good thing is that they're taking it in piecemeal, but I know there are exceptions to the 2/3 rule, where clauses relating to Section 8 and 9, and some of the provisions in Section 315 of the Constitution, and those 4 areas: NYC decree, the Act of the Nigerian Security, and a few other issues that were raised in Section 315, which we need the 4/5 of the National Assembly to pass. I'm very sure that those clauses are not involved in these alterations, are they?
No, the clauses are not involved. That's why I'm only relying on what is on Section 8 of the Constitution. Because if we are talking about creation of states, amongst other things, perhaps we will now be thinking of a totally different proposition. Instead of 2/3, we should be talking about 4/5, as the case may be. But all the areas now under consideration are clearly within the ambit of Section 8, and to that extent, it only requires 2/3 majority for them to kill.
Right.
And thereafter, it will now go to the House of Assembly for their approval through resolution by members of the House of Assembly of the respective states of the Federation.
All right. Thank you so much, Professor Epiphany Azinge, Senior Advocate of Nigeria and a law scholar. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you for having me.
That's our program tonight, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Sean Kimale. Bye for now.